The morning started like any other, with the city slowly waking up and the hospital already buzzing with activity. People moved through the hallways with a rhythm that came from doing the same routine every day. Among them was a doctor who had spent years saving lives, staying calm, even when everything around him was falling apart. He had a quiet way of working, never loud or dramatic, but always focused. Many of the nurses trusted him the most because he didn't panic, simply did what needed to be done. He was finishing his morning rounds, checking on a few patients, and giving small instructions here and there. Even though he had seen every type of emergency over the years, he still treated every patient with the same level of care. He knew their fears, their worries, and the pressure their families carried. Hospitals were places where hope and fear lived side by side, and he tried his best to ease both. Just as he stepped out of a patient's room, a call came through the hospital radio. The tone of the nurse speaking told him everything. Something serious was coming in. A child had been in a terrible accident. The injuries were severe and the ambulance was already speeding toward the hospital. The doctor's calm expression tightened for a moment, but then he straightened and moved quickly. When it involved a child, the pressure always felt heavier, like the air around him shifted. He hurried through the hallways, weaving past staff members who were also preparing for the emergency. He could hear the distant echo of rushed footsteps, the beeping of equipment being moved, and the nervous voices of nurses trying to coordinate everything in time. Every second mattered now. The child needed help the moment they arrived, and he couldn't waste even a breath. As he approached the emergency ward, he mentally reviewed the steps he needed to take to stabilize someone with serious injuries. He thought about airway support, internal bleeding, blood loss, and shock. These were things he had handled many times before. Experience helped, but it never made it easier when it came to someone so young. He took a deep breath, preparing himself for whatever he was about to face. Outside, the ambulance sirens grew louder, filling the air with urgency. The hospital doors slid open as the vehicle screeched to a stop. Paramedics jumped out, their voices sharp and hurried as they relayed the child's condition. It was bad, worse than he had hoped, but he had seen people survive impossible odds before. He wasn't ready to lose hope. The doctor stepped forward, ready to take over, but just then, something unexpected happened. A young staff member blocked his path, holding a clipboard and shaking slightly. "Sir, we need clearance first," the staff member said. "There's a new rule. Special procedures need approval now, even during emergencies." The doctor blinked, confused. Approval now? In a moment like this? For years, emergency cases had always been handled immediately, without hesitation. Lives depended on speed. He tried to keep his voice steady. "We don't have time for that. Child needs immediate care. Move out of the way." The staff member looked scared, torn between the rules they had been given and the reality of the situation. "I'm sorry. They told us we have to follow the new policy. Could get in trouble if we don't." Phew. More staff members gathered, equally unsure, and the delay began stretching longer than it ever should. The doctor's heartbeat thudded harder. He wasn't angry at them, they were just following instructions. But the rules were interfering at the worst time possible. Behind him, the paramedics shouted updates on the child's condition. The doctor could hear the fear in their voices. He stepped closer, lowering his tone. "Listen to me. Can't play with a life. If we lose time, we lose the child. Help me get inside. We'll sort out the paperwork later." The staff exchanged looks, shifting nervously. They wanted to help. He could see it in their eyes. But the hesitation lingered, holding them back. Procedures and rules suddenly felt more powerful than the life lying on the stretcher. Finally, after precious seconds slipping away, one nurse quietly stepped aside, giving him just enough space. The others followed, though reluctantly. The doctor rushed in, pushing the stretcher with the paramedics toward the emergency room. Inside, the air felt heavier. Nurses scrambled to bring supplies, and the doctor called out instructions while checking the child's pulse and breathing. The situation was critical, worked fast, but he also felt the pressure of the lost time hanging over him like a shadow. Still, he tried to focus. The child needed him to be fully present. He had worked through chaos before, but today felt different. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the earlier delay, or maybe it was the fear of what it might cost. As the team gathered around, he guided everyone with calm but firm orders. Even when things looked bleak, he refused to lose his composure. Because in moments like this, the doctor knew one thing for sure. Hope only survived when people acted quickly. And he was determined to give the child the best chance possible. But deep down, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that the delays, those few stolen minutes, might come back to haunt them in ways they couldn't yet see. The doctor stood over the child, his hands moving quickly but carefully, checking vital signs and adjusting equipment. The child's small body was pale and trembling, and every second seemed to stretch longer than the last. The monitors beeped. Warnings, and the staff around him moved as fast as they could, but the tension in the room was thick, almost suffocating. He could feel the weight of the delay pressing on him. Those few minutes before they reached the room felt like an eternity, and he knew that sometimes, in critical situations, even a moment could make the difference between life and death. He instructed a nurse to start an IV and another to prepare oxygen. His voice was steady, but there was an urgency in it that made everyone move faster. He glanced at the paramedics, who looked exhausted but determined. They had done everything they could to bring the child to the hospital safely, but now the real fight was in front of them. The doctor knew that the earlier delay, caused by rules and approvals, had already cost them precious time. "Keep talking to me," he said to the child softly. Even though the child was unconscious, "We're going to fix this. Hang on." His words weren't just for the child, they were for everyone in the room. The staff needed to feel hope, even when fear was pressing down on them. He moved from one side of the stretcher to the other, checking breathing, pulse, and circulation, calling out instructions in short, precise sentences. The room was a flurry of activity, but the doctor's calm energy kept it from descending into chaos. Then he ran into another obstacle. The hospital's emergency software required authorization before certain advanced procedures could be started. The system wouldn't let the nurses proceed without it. The doctor's stomach sank. He'd been through many emergencies, but he had never faced a time when technology and policy directly blocked him from acting. The seconds ticked away. He could feel each one like a weight pressing against his chest. "Ignore the system for now," he said firmly. "This is life or death. We can sort the paperwork after the child is stable." Some of the staff hesitated, unsure if they were allowed to bypass the digital approval. The doctor moved closer, placing a reassuring hand on one nurse's shoulder. "We're saving a life. It's the most important rule here. Do you understand?" The nurse nodded, determination finally shining through. Everyone around him seemed to draw strength from his confidence. Slowly but surely, the team started acting as one, each person focused on their part of the emergency. The child's small chest rose and fell irregularly, and the doctor adjusted the oxygen and prepared to give critical medication. Every action had to be precise, every second used wisely. While he worked, he thought about the family. He didn't know them personally, but he could imagine their fear and helplessness. He pictured the parents rushing to the hospital, hoping and praying for good news. That thought drove him to push, harder to keep moving despite exhaustion creeping into his bones. He had a responsibility to every person in the room, but especially to the child who couldn't fight for themselves. Time felt like it was slipping through his fingers. He noticed that the child's oxygen levels were dropping dangerously. He had to make a quick decision act immediately, or risk losing the child. He called for more hands, and everyone responded, bringing additional equipment and supplies. The doctor's mind moved faster than the clock, calculating doses, monitoring vitals, and giving orders all at once. The room seemed to shrink around the tension. Beeping machines, hurried footsteps, and the sound of the child's weak breathing filled the air. Despite the chaos, the doctor remained a calm center. He knew that panic would spread like wildfire, but focus could save a life. He leaned closer to the child, speaking softly again, reminding them to hold on, even if it was unlikely they could hear as he prepared a critical procedure. He realized something else: some of the equipment was missing. A nurse explained that it had been moved for another case. The doctor didn't have time to argue. He improvised, using alternative methods he had learned over years of experience. Improvisation in emergencies wasn't new to him. But this time, every choice carried heavier. consequences because the delay had already weakened the child's condition. He worked relentlessly, moving from one procedure to another, all while encouraging his team and making sure each step was correct. Sweat dripped from his forehead, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Lives depended on him. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down, but it only strengthened his resolve. Minutes passed, like hours. The doctor kept checking vitals, adjusting medication, and speaking words of encouragement. Sometimes he glanced at the staff, offering a nod or a quick smile to remind them that they were doing everything possible. He didn't allow despair to settle in, not for himself and not for the team. They needed him strong, clear-headed, and confident. The child's condition remained critical, teetering between stability and collapse. The doctor knew that every second mattered, but he also knew that giving up was not an option. He kept pushing, kept thinking, and kept acting. Each breath the child took felt like a small victory, but he also understood that the fight wasn't over. The earlier obstacles, the bureaucratic delays, and the rules that blocked immediate action had already made this emergency more dangerous than it should have been. Through all this, he never lost sight of the human element. He thought about the fear, hope, and trust that had been placed in him. He treated the child not just as a patient, but as a human being with a life worth fighting for. Every action, every decision was guided by that understanding. He knew he couldn't control everything, but he could control how hard he fought. And he fought with everything he had. The doctor's hands moved with a practiced precision, but the tension in the room was almost tangible. The child's vital signs continued to fluctuate, and each dip in the monitors brought a fresh wave of concern. Every member of the team felt it, but none more than the doctor, who understood that every decision, every action, could mean the difference between life and death. Despite the intensity, he kept a steady voice, issuing instructions calmly so the staff could follow without panic. He had managed emergencies before. This one carried a heavier weight. The earlier delay had made a difficult situation even more dangerous. The bureaucracy that blocked immediate action now felt like an invisible force against them. Time had slipped away when it mattered most, and the doctor knew it. Every second lost could have lasting consequences, but all he could do now was push forward. "Get me the suction and the ventilator ready," he said quickly, scanning the equipment and assigning tasks in short bursts. Nurses moved rapidly, their hands shaking but determined, guided by the doctor's calm authority. He adjusted the oxygen flow, checked the 4 lines, and kept a close watch on the monitors. Each beep and alarm felt louder in the quiet moments between instructions, each one a reminder of the fragility of the situation. The child's breathing grew more erratic, and the doctor's mind raced. He had to act faster, and he had to make sure that no step was missed. He instructed a nurse to prepare a life-saving medication while simultaneously checking the airway. His experience allowed him to multitask in a way that made it seem almost effortless, but inside, he felt the pressure like a heavy stone pressing on his chest. He noticed the worry on the faces around him and spoke to reassure them. "Focus on what you can do. Follow my lead. We can still help the child." His words were firm but kind, designed to give confidence to those who were feeling the weight of fear and doubt. He understood that a team needed not just guidance, but also belief that they could succeed even when the situation seemed dire. At one point, the equipment they needed was not immediately available. The doctor didn't hesitate. He improvised, using alternative tools and methods he had learned through years of experience. He instructed the staff to adapt with him, and together they made adjustments on the fly. The child's condition remained critical, but every step they took was a small victory against the danger surrounding them. The doctor kept speaking softly to the child. Even though the child was unconscious, "We're going to get through this. Stay with me." His voice was steady, filled with a combination of urgency and hope. He knew that while the child could not respond, the human connection mattered. It reminded the staff why they were there and why they needed to fight with everything they had. Minutes passed, each one heavy with tension. The monitors continued to fluctuate, and the doctor adjusted the treatment in real time, reacting instantly to any change. He felt the exhaustion creeping into his muscles but pushed through it. There was no room for fatigue when a life hung in the balance. His focus was absolute. Every thought concentrated on saving the child. The team worked like a single unit under his direction. Each nurse, each paramedic, each assistant followed his lead, trusting in his skill and experience. The energy in the room was intense, a mix of fear, hope, and determination. The doctor moved from one task to another seamlessly, giving instructions, performing critical actions, and checking on progress with a precise rhythm. Then, another challenge arose. A required form for advanced treatment had not been signed because the administrator was unavailable. The staff hesitated again, uncertain if they should proceed without official authorization. The doctor's jaw tightened, and he spoke clearly, leaving no room for doubt. Authorization is not more important than a life. We proceed now, and we sort it out later. This is an emergency. That statement broke the hesitation. The staff finally acted without fear, following his orders fully. The doctor's leadership reminded them why experience and judgment mattered more than paperwork when it came to emergencies. Together, they continued to fight against the odds, performing procedures, administering medications, and closely monitoring the child's response. Despite all efforts, the situation remained tense. The child's body was fragile, responding slowly to treatment. The doctor's mind never stopped moving. He calculated, predicted, and reacted to every change. He knew that even small mistakes could be catastrophic, and he made sure none were made. Every action was deliberate, precise, and purposeful. Through it all, he maintained a sense of hope, even when fear threatened to creep in. He reminded the staff that giving up was not an option. Every small improvement, every slight stabilization of vitals became a beacon of encouragement. He held on to the belief that their efforts could still make a difference, that the child could survive if they didn't give up. The room was a whirlwind of action, but the doctor remained the calm center. His presence was a grounding force, giving the team confidence to act, adapt, and respond quickly. He kept the human element at the heart of every decision, reminding everyone that behind the monitors, alarms, and procedures was a living, a breathing child who deserved every effort. Hours seemed to compress into minutes as the team continued working tirelessly. Each second felt precious, every heartbeat significant. The doctor's mind raced, but his body remained steady, driven by experience, knowledge, and an unwavering commitment to the child's life. He pushed through fear, exhaustion, and frustration, channeling all energy into the one thing that mattered most: saving the child. Despite all the effort, despite the careful actions and precise decisions, the child's condition took a sudden turn for the worse. The monitors started beeping loudly, signaling danger. The doctor moved immediately, calling out instructions and adjusting equipment. His hands worked quickly, but a sinking feeling began to grow in his chest. He had done everything possible, every action measured and precise. But the previous delays, the moments lost because of rules, approvals, and hesitation, had already taken a toll. He tried to stabilize the child using every method he knew. The team worked frantically around him, their movements precise but filled with a quiet desperation. Every second counted, and every action had to be perfect. The doctor never raised his voice, but the urgency in his tone was enough to drive the team to act faster, to give everything they had. He kept encouraging the nurses and paramedics, reminding them that their efforts were saving precious time, that the fight was not over yet. The child's breathing became more shallow, and the doctor placed his hands on their chest. Feeling the weak rhythm of a life struggling to hold on, he spoke softly, even as he worked. "Hold on, we are not done yet. Stay with me." He knew the words were small against the severity of the situation, but they were meant to remind everyone that there was still a chance. However fragile, despite his relentless effort, the child's body began to fail. The doctor tried every procedure, every medication, every adjustment possible, but the vital signs kept dropping. The room was filled with tension, the air thick with the fear and hope of everyone present. He looked at the monitors, hoping for a sign that the child was responding. But the numbers continued to decline. The nurse closest to him hesitated for a moment, unsure of the next step. The doctor placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Do what you can. Follow my lead. We fight until the last moment." His words were a mixture of command and comfort, guiding the team to act decisively, despite the fear of failure. They needed his strength, his focus, and his experience to hold them steady. Minutes dragged into an agonizing blur. The doctor kept moving, adjusting medications, checking breathing, and monitoring heart rate. He switched methods, trying alternate procedures he had learned over years of experience. The team followed his every move, working in a rhythm dictated by the doctor's presence and skill, even in the face of exhaustion and mounting despair. They refused to give up, yet deep down, the doctor felt a heavy truth settling over him. The earlier delays, the moments lost to bureaucracy, could not be undone. Those precious minutes might have been the difference between life and death. He refused to let it paralyze him, but he could not ignore the reality either. He kept acting, but each beat of the child's heart reminded him of what had been stolen by circumstances beyond his control. He glanced around at the team. Faces were pale, eyes wide with the weight of the situation. Families would soon arrive, expecting hope, expecting a child to be saved. He took a deep breath, knowing he had given everything, and that sometimes even everything is not enough. The room was filled with quiet determination, but also with a shared understanding of the tragedy that was unfolding. The child's condition finally stabilized for a brief moment. The doctor's hands didn't stop moving, but he felt the fleeting relief that the heart had slowed just enough to hold. It wasn't victory, it was only a pause, a fragile window of hope. He kept whispering, encouraging both the child and the staff, doing everything possible to maintain that fragile balance between life and death. But the fragility didn't last. Soon, the vital signs dropped sharply, and the reality of the situation became impossible to ignore. The child's body could not sustain itself. Despite the relentless fight, the combination of injuries and lost time overcame them. The doctor's heart sank, the weight of failure pressing down despite his best efforts. He had saved many lives before, but this one slipped away. And it was not for lack of skill or effort, but because circumstances had created a gap he could not bridge. The room fell into a quiet, heavy stillness. The monitors went silent. The doctor stepped back, his mind racing yet numb, processing the reality that even the most determined effort could not always overcome the consequences of delays. The staff looked around, some with tears welling in their eyes, others simply frozen in disbelief. They had fought valiantly, but the outcome was tragic. He silently acknowledged the unfairness of it all. Knowing that no words could undo the loss, he thought about the family, imagining their shock and grief. The child had been a life full of potential, dreams, and love, all cut short. The weight of their loss pressed on him heavily. He had done everything he could in the time he had. But the earlier obstacles, the hesitation, the rules, the bureaucracy, had left an unfillable gap. It was a lesson in tragedy that he could not ignore. Yet even in that moment, the doctor remained a figure of quiet strength. He comforted the staff, guiding them through the process of informing the family and documenting the efforts they had made. He spoke gently, giving reassurance that they had not failed through negligence, but were victims of circumstances beyond anyone's control. His focus remained on the human element, the grief, the emotions, and the need for compassion even amidst tragedy. The events of that day would leave a mark on everyone in the room. The child's life lost despite the best efforts became a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the cost of preventable delays. The doctor, though devastated, knew that the only way forward was to learn from it, to ensure that no future life would be lost in the same way. The grief, though heavy, was coupled with a resolve to make a difference, to fight against the systems that could block the work of life-saving professionals. As the room began to quiet, the doctor reflected on the day's events. The battle had been fought with skill, determination, and unwavering effort, but sometimes even that is not enough. He felt the weight of the tragedy deeply. But he also knew that the memory of the child and the fight to save them would fuel future change. The loss was heartbreaking, but it was not meaningless. It was a call to action, a reminder of the urgent need to put lives before procedures. To ensure that no one else would face a preventable delay when every second mattered, the hospital was quiet now. The rush of the emergency replaced with a heavy stillness. The staff moved slowly, their energy drained from the intense battle that had just ended. The doctor sat for a moment, taking in the weight of the day. He had fought with every skill, every ounce of knowledge, and every bit of energy. But sometimes even that was not enough. The child's life had been lost, and the reality of it pressed on him with a heavy hand. He thought about the family, imagining their grief and confusion. They had trusted the hospital to protect their child, and he had done everything he could to honor that trust. Yet he knew that the delay earlier, the bureaucracy and hesitation, had made the difference between life and death. He allowed himself a moment to feel the frustration, the anger at a system that sometimes got in the way of the most important work, saving lives. But grief was not the only feeling. A determination began to grow within him. This tragedy, as devastating as it was, could become a catalyst for change. He would use the lessons of today to ensure that no future patient would face preventable delays, that no other life would be lost to unnecessary obstacles. He stood, shaking off the exhaustion, and began to walk through the empty hallways, thinking about what could be improved, what systems could be changed. He started speaking with the hospital administration, calmly and clearly explaining what had happened. He described how the delay had impacted the child's chances, not in an accusatory tone, but with the intention of creating understanding and change. The administration listened, some with shock, some with remorse. The doctor's calm but firm approach conveyed the urgency of the situation. Policies needed to be examined and adjusted so that emergency care could never be blocked by paperwork again. The staff, as though still processing their grief, began to find hope in his resolve. They understood that while the outcome had been tragic, there was a way forward. They could help implement changes that would prevent such a tragedy in the future. The doctor encouraged them, reminding them that their dedication and skill had been undeniable, that they had acted with courage and precision under impossible circumstances. As days passed, the hospital began to review its emergency procedures. The doctor worked with both staff and administrators to create protocols that would ensure immediate action in life-threatening situations. They discussed new ways to empower medical professionals to make critical decisions quickly, without waiting for approvals that could cost lives. Meetings were long, and discussions were sometimes heated, but the shared goal was clear: prevent what had happened from happening again. The doctor also spent time with the families affected, offering support and compassion. He listened to their pain, their anger, and their questions. He did not shy away from the truth of what had happened, acknowledging both his efforts and the unfortunate reality. His presence, calm and human, provided a small comfort, though nothing could bring back the child. The honesty and care he showed helped the families begin to process their grief. He also took time to reflect personally. The tragedy weighed heavily, but he used it as a lesson for himself, reminding him why he had chosen this profession. Every life mattered, and every action counted. The experience reinforced the importance of advocating for patients, fighting for systems that support life-saving work rather than hinder it. He resolved to continue being vigilant, to ensure that compassion and skill always had the space to act without unnecessary obstacles. In the weeks that followed, changes began to take root. New protocols were implemented, staff were trained on emergency prioritization, and approval processes were streamlined. The hospital became a place where life-saving action could take precedence over bureaucracy, a place where delays like the one that had cost a young life could be avoided. The doctor's efforts created a ripple effect, improving the ability of the hospital to respond to emergencies in the future, though the pain of the loss never completely disappeared. The doctor found a sense of purpose in the change he could create. He continued his work, seeing patients, guiding staff, and advocating for better emergency care. He knew that tragedies might happen again, but he also knew that each lesson learned could save lives. The memory of the child and the fight to save them became a driving force, reminding him and those around him why their work mattered so deeply in the end. The story of that day was one of both tragedy and hope. A life was lost, a family grieved, and the staff carried the weight of their efforts. But the lessons learned brought meaningful change, ensuring that the future would be safer for those in need. The doctor, though deeply affected by the loss, remained committed to his calling, inspired to continue fighting for every life, determined to turn heartbreak into action that could prevent future sorrow. The memory of the child lingered as a reminder that life is precious and that every second counts. And it fueled a resolve to make sure that no future seconds would be wasted when a life hung in the balance.